Hey, second grade. So we are going to be taking our questioning skills into nonfiction books, and nonfiction books are books that are true. And we are going to be asking ourselves today. The big question we're asking is, what is important here? So, what is the page telling us? What is the author trying to teach us? And what is important? So, the book we're reading today is called Chameleons Are Cool. So, what do you think this book is going to be all about? Probably Chameleons, right? That's the name of the book. And it's written by Martin Jenkins and illustrated by Sue Shields. Sorry, friends. Chameleons are cool. I'm going to zoom out a bit here. Chameleons are lizards, and lizards are reptiles, like snakes, crocodiles, and tortoises. There are about 4,000 kinds of lizards altogether, including around 120 different chameleons. Just over half of all the types of chameleons come from Madagascar, a big island off the east coast of Africa. Most of the others live in mainland Africa. So what is important here? We know that chameleons are reptiles. We learned that most chameleons live in Africa, and more than half live off of the Madagascar island. Live on the Madagascar island. Chameleons are cool. Some lizards eat bananas. Chameleons don't. Some lizards walk upside down on the ceiling. Chameleons can't. There's even a lizard that glides from tree to tree. A chameleon certainly wouldn't do that. Gecko's toes are as sticky as Velcro. The flying lizard glides on wing like flaps of skin. And iguanas don't just eat bananas, they love all sorts of fruit. But of all the different kinds of lizard, I still think chameleons are the best. Chameleons are cool. It's not that they're big, it's not that they're all that big. The biggest is only about the size of a rather small cat. It's called Aucelet's chameleon, and it lives in Madagascar. They can be really, really small, though. The smallest one could balance happily on your little finger. It's called the dwarf Brookesia, and it lives in Madagascar too. The caption here says, "Whatever their size, chameleons usually get sick and die if kept as pets. They're much better off left in the wild." And I suppose you wouldn't exactly call many of them beautiful. Their skin is wrinkly and bumpy, and they've got big bulgy eyes, while lots of them have the most ridiculous, what do you think, friends? Noses. I think it's their noses I like best. Wow, look at those noses, friends. So what has been important in the last couple of pages? We know that chameleons come in different sizes. We know that chameleons have bumpy and wrinkly skin. And we also know that they have weird noses. Their mouths are pretty odd too. They turn down at the corners, which is why chameleons always look grumpy. Actually, they don't just look grumpy, they are grumpy. If two chameleons bump into each other, things can get pretty lively. There's lots of puffing and hissing, and sometimes there's a real fight. A chameleon will fight only with the same kind of chameleon as itself. And that's when chameleons do what they're most famous for: they change colors. Lots of people think chameleons change colors to match their surroundings. They don't. They change color when they're angry, or when they're too cold, or too hot, or when they're sick. And there are some sorts of chameleons that hardly change color at all. I think it's important to know that what we thought, that chameleons change color with their surroundings, is not true, and that they change colors when they're angry, or when they're too hot or too cold, or when they're sick. So basically, when something's wrong. As a rule, though, chameleons don't bump into one another all that often. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to call them lazy, but they certainly don't move any more than they have to. And when they do, it's almost always incredibly slow. A chameleon's feet are shaped like pincers for holding onto branches tightly. A pincer is like something that pinches. Sometimes they stop completely in mid step, as if they've forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. But if you look closely, you'll see that they're actually carefully peering about. Peering means looking, so they're carefully looking about. Oops. Now, peering about is something chameleons are rather good at. That's because their eyes can move separately from each other, unlike our eyes, which always move together. Most of a chameleon's eye is covered in skin, like the rest of its body. There's a tiny peephole in the middle of that the chameleon sees through. So while one eye is looking back over the chameleon's shoulder, the other one is scanning the branches ahead. As soon as it spots something tasty, the chameleon fixes both eyes on its prey and begins to creep forward, even more slowly than usual. Then it opens its mouth just a crack and flap. Out shoots this amazingly long tongue with a sticky tip at the end, like a piece of well chewed chewing gum. Chameleons feed on all sorts of creepy crawlies. The big ones also eat small birds, mice, and even other chameleons. Whoa. So let's see. We learned what's important about chameleons. What do we learn? We learned that their eyes move separately from one another. We learned that they have pincers. We learned that they move very slowly. And we already talked about that page. We also learned that they eat insects. And some bigger chameleons eat small birds, mice, and even other chameleons. Then the tongue flies back, and there's a lot of chomping and chewing, and perhaps a few bits of insect like fluttering to the ground. And after that, chameleon just sits there for an hour or two, doing nothing very much at all, looking quite exhausted and still grumpy after all that hard work. Most lizards gulp their food down without chewing it, but chameleons grind everything up thoroughly. Whoa. And there you have it. How could you possibly resist the pocket sized, bad tempered, colored changing, swivel eyes, snail paced, long tongued sharpshooter? If chameleons aren't cool, then I don't know what is. The end. Then this is the index, and we can, if we were looking for something like chewing, we'd go to page 26. If we were looking for their mouth, what they do with their mouth, we'd go to 15 or 23. So what did you learn about chameleons? What was your favorite chameleon fact?